right. I'm hoping we've got the slides right this week, not like last week. How many of you are two-faced? We have one honest person in the room. Two. Any advance? Well, have a look around you. Do you see anybody else in the church who's two-faced? Well, is that being too judgmental? Well, I have a theory. That theory is that everybody wears two faces. One is our public face, where we interact with people and we do everything as right as we can within the decorum of our culture. The other one is our private face, when we're at home. The one where we sit around on a cold morning in our pyjamas till midday and hope nobody comes to knock on the door. And that's appropriate, really. I mean, surely we can relax a bit when we're in our home. And we put on different faces according to the degree of formality or casualness that's appropriate to the occasion. There's nothing wrong with wearing different hats at different times. It's necessary. And we know that when people break the decorum, that's social gaffe. But it's when those two codes, the code by which we conduct our public life and the code by which we live when we're in private, when they become incompatible, that's when we've got a problem. If we are one person when we're out and a totally different person when we're at home, that's a problem. The core being should be the same consistently with different codes for different contexts. Now, last week I spoke about Paul's urging to present yourselves a living and holy sacrifice to God, which is acceptable to God, which is your spiritual service of worship. And we focused last week on the relationships we have, the public relationships we have within the church membership and functioning. Today I wanted to bring that to another aspect, what Paul teaches about how we walk our intimate private life with Christ, the one that is our secret life, not our public life. And in Philippians, Paul teaches us about two laws. He introduces the concept of two laws, the laws of the flesh and the law of the spirit. These are the codes by which we live our private life, in our private world, our thought world. And the flesh against the spirit. He introduces this concept and then expands it a little bit more through the various books. It features through many of his letters, but most particularly in Romans, which we'll look at in just a moment. But these codes are the laws by which we govern our lives. And in Romans 12, verse 2, he said, do not be conformed to the things of this world, but be transformed. And that word transformed, the form of that word means be continuously being transformed. It's a continuing thing. It's not a one-off thing saying, oh, I've changed my dress. It's a continuing development of the person by the renewing of your mind. And it's that transformation by the renewing of our minds that I want to take as a major theme for this next little while. In Philippians, this is what he says. The first phrase I find a little bit amusing, beware of the dogs. I'm not quite sure about that one, but no, I'm not sure I can find any. Beware of the evil workers, but the key part of it is this: for it is we who are the circumcision, who worship in the Spirit of God and boast in Christ Jesus, and have no confidence in the flesh. Even though I too have reason for confidence in the flesh. And he goes on these next words to say about his religious life. And that's what he's talking about all along, the way we perform and conduct our religious belief and practice. And he lists all the reasons why he has confidence in the flesh. all the ritualistic things that are appropriate to do religion properly. How he was born, how he was raised, how he conducted himself, how he persecuted the church and so on. All these things were the marks of righteousness in his religious walk. But in this, there was no place for God, only for ritual and right actions. It denied God and it persecuted Christ. Then he goes on to the other side, the transformed Paul, where he now accepts that I regard all that as loss. It was just rubbish, so that I may gain Christ. And to come to fulfill the laws of God, but this time, not through religious ritual, but through the righteousness from God based on faith. So he switches from religious righteous to faith-based righteousness, found in Christ, not his own flesh. And so he then goes on, say, I want to know Christ and the power of his resurrection and sharing of his sufferings, if somehow I might attain to the resurrection. And so he highlights the difference in the basis of what is a righteous person before God. Then in Romans he goes on to list a number of characteristics and outcomes of the conflicting codes of behaviour and of being. In our private world, it's not so much about our behaviour, but about who we are. It's the inner person, not the external show. He starts off with a statement of just verdict. He uses the imagery of the law, the forensic terms, the court law. And he says there's now no condemnation for those who are in Christ. The law of the Spirit of life in Christ has set you free from the law of sin and death. So somehow or other, Jesus has intervened and become the one who's paid the penalty. But what is the basis of this charge that expected condemnation comes from it? Well, we see he's already dealt with this in Romans chapter 6 and 3, where he says, all have sinned and come short of the glory of God. All have sinned. Well, what is that sin? Fundamentally, it is the failure to recognise and respect God and his sovereignty in all of life. That is what Paul defines as spiritual sin. The failure to accept, to respect God in all aspects of life, even the private parts. And then he says the wages of sin is death. In other words, this is the natural outcome. See, when we talk about the penalty, we often think of very judgmental, very stern, punitive type of thing. But the reality is this. If we've put a distance between us and God, we're no longer in his presence. The inevitability of that is we've lost connection. If you have a friend for a long, long time and they walk away, put distance between you and them, eventually you'll come not to know them. My best friend at school was Rod. I was his best man at his wedding 8 years later, and he was the best man at my wedding. We got married, we had a child. I met him then. The last time I saw him was Christmas Eve 1969. Never saw him again. We went separate ways. We've been so close, but we diverged in our beliefs and our understandings and our lifestyles, and we just lost contact. The next time I heard of him, he was on the phone to me in despair, ringing me from Canberra somewhere. We arranged to meet. I thought in that phone call he was suicidal. And I called it a spade and let him know what I thought, and we've got to meet. He didn't keep that appointment. A few years later, I saw him again. I didn't see him actually. I saw a news bulletin. where he was found lying dead on the Kingsford Smith Drive. And everybody walked past him for 3 or 4 days thinking he was just a drunk. He was 57. I lost that friend. How must God feel when he loses people who walk away from him? It's tragic. So because all have sinned and are worthy of it, to fulfill the law of God, something has to be paid. And the only one who could pay it was Jesus, the only one good enough. And we see in this verse, for God sent his own Son to deal with sin, which he condemned sin in the flesh, for those who walk not according to the flesh, but according to the Spirit. If my son gets a speeding ticket and he's got no money to pay for it, I pay for it. And guess who's declared guilt-free? Not me, him. I bore the cost, but he got the freedom. And that's the way it works with any law. Doesn't matter who pays the price, so long as it's paid. Here, Jesus was the only one who had sufficient credit to pay everybody. Now, through him, all humanity now has access to being reconciled to God, to return, to stand in the face of God. The fulfillment of God's law in Jesus. Now, it then goes on to elaborate these two laws and their outcomes. The first one is the law of the flesh. He deals with this. Those who are in the flesh. To set the mind on the flesh is death, but to set the mind on the Spirit is life and peace. And when it comes to the sins of the flesh, the language used, we tend to think of things like sexual immorality. And so on, fair enough. But the sins of the flesh are not just those things like that. It's a much broader scope than that. We're talking about spiritual sin, not just carnal knowledge of somebody. But the key phrase is this one: set the mind on. And here he talks about setting the mind. Remember back in Romans 12:2, we said, be continually transformed by the renewing of your mind. And this is what he's taking up here, or has spoken about already in Romans. And to set the mind on something is to have a focus on the things which satisfy you. To set the mind on things of the flesh is to spend your time, your private time, your private thinking time, your dreaming time, your musing time, your fantasy time. What would I do if I had $1 million? What would I do with it? Well, ask yourself that question. What would you do if you suddenly had a big windfall like that? Humongous cash you'd never thought possible in your life. No strings. What would you do with it? First thing that comes to your mind. What was it? Don't tell me. I don't want to know. But tell yourself. And look yourself in the mirror and say, that's what I put my first impulse on. And that's probably going pretty close to the truth. We think of holidays. When I'm in my clinic 3 days a week, I spend about an hour watching TV at the end of the 4 hours because I can't stand reading anymore. And there's a quiz show, a game show based on a quiz where people are often playing for money. And people are often asked before they go for the last challenge, now if you win all this money, this $20,000 or whatever it is, what would you like to do with it? You know what most of them say? That 80-90% of the responses get holidays. First thing you all thought of too, wasn't it? Holidays. And I was staggered at this. Oh, have an indulgent big holiday. I'm thinking, I can think of a lot better things to do than that. But I'm 81, not 25. It might make a difference. But what is the first thing you think of that you would love to have or love to see happen? And how much room is there for God in that? That's the question I want to ask you to address. When you are chasing your dreams, where is God? Have you rejected him from that aspiration from that hope, that wish, that dream? Or is he a part of it? Now, we can have lots of good dreams and aspirations. We can enjoy or apply ourselves well to setting up our education, our career, our family, our home, and those things. But it's when God has no room in them that they are the things of the flesh. When we are seeking to fulfill ourselves, to enjoy ourselves, to do what's right for me and mine, that's a self-focus, not a God focus. And so not only is that a wrong focus, but it has inevitable outcomes. Hostility to God. Impossibility to being reconciled to God. Because when we are so enmeshed in these pursuits and these dreams that we have no time for God, no need of God, no chance to reconcile with God. But on the opposite side, those who live according to the Spirit set their minds on the things of the Spirit. Their mind comes first and foremost to what can I do to walk with God in this? How can I make sure I never turn my back on God in this, in my job, in my family, in my leisure time activities? I'm not suggesting for one moment that we should never have a family and never be responsible in looking after them. No, that's stupidity. But what I am saying, I hope as clearly as I can, is that whatever good things we are doing in our life, if there is no room for God, we have put a distance between ourselves and God. And that can be in the pursuit of good things. But if they have a fleshly focus and not a spirit-led focus, then, frankly, they're wrong. Not so much that they are wrong, but our mind is wrong in putting so much value on them. And the outcome is, if the Spirit is in you, you're in the Spirit, the Spirit of God dwells in you. Christ is in you, the Spirit of life, because of righteousness. Spirit is life. Friends, we can desire the most comfortable home, the most high salaried position, the most power in our professional life. Or we can be like so many that we see around us who speak one thing but really are craving another. I am appalled, and my own personal views are coming out here, I realise, but I'm appalled by world-leading politicians who criticise others for being populist while being all about pandering to whatever votes they can get to stay in power. And it's virtually every politician who is a success. I had a wonderful young man in a class of mine in senior English at Caboolture High School in the 1970s. He's the dux of the school. He's a very capable young man, a brilliant debater in the Queensland State debating team. He was the debating champion. And he wanted to be a politician. He wanted to be a politician because as a devout and sincere Christian, he wanted to make a difference somewhere where it was important. And we talked about this. We had lots of good conversations about where he was going and the capacity he had for doing it. And then towards the end of year 12, coming home on a bus after a debate one night at Nambour, he said to me, I changed my mind. I said, what about Dave? He said, I'm going to be a doctor. He said, I said, what about your political ambitions? He said, thought that through. He said, and I've realised that to be successful in politics, you have to toe the party line, or else you get nowhere. And if I can't toe the party line, I get nowhere. I might get elected, but I'd be useless. But being a doctor, I can actually do some good for people. Now, I thought that was a very sad statement, but he's been a brilliant doctor ever since and doing a lot of good stuff. But I think it's sad when our political leaders give such an example of so fleshly a life. And so the outcome for this is life, now and eternally. That is the spiritual led life. And so, in summary, to be led by the Spirit is to become the child of God. Not living in desolation and isolation and separation from God, but to be a part of his family with all the kinship privileges of that. Look, people, I look around this church and I see we all have a lot of privilege of the kinship with Christ. But I still wonder, for every one of us, I'm not saying how many are in here, but let's say I pick a number, about 35. I'm talking to 35 people here, and I'm one of them. If my mind is set on things that have no room for God, then I need to get my mind transformed. And Paul talks a lot about transforming the mind. Transformation by setting your mind on the things that are right. And it's that mindset. Being transformed is not a moment in time, it's a continuous process. But it's also a process that involves our mind. It's not just a miraculous thing that we hope and wish for and one day it'll be there. It's something we need to work on. And the doctor told me 8 to 10 years ago that I had to lose weight. That wasn't going to be easy. But he impressed on me the urgency of it. So I did exactly what I was told over the next 6 months. Exactly. Rigorous dieting, rigorous exercise, rigorous lifestyle. Setting my mind on it. 6 months later, the weight was under control. And has been ever since, I'm pleased to say. Even more pleased to experience. But transformation always requires a mental effort and a disciplined mind, a determination to see it through. So if you want to start knowing what is God's will, God's good and perfect will, walk with him. Take time to walk with him. Make the effort to walk with him. It won't come otherwise. It won't come if you just sleep your way through it, having dreams of other things. So our opening song today was Every Day. Every day I'll walk with you. Every day I'll live with you. Is that true? Did we sing that as a religious ritual song? Or was it a reality in our life? Every day, I'd like to change one word or two in that line. Instead of every day, I'll walk with you. Every day, I do walk with you. And then we see in Ephesians 5:8, you were formerly darkness, but now you are light in the Lord. Live as children of light. Conduct yourselves in a manner worthy of Christ. And then we'll experience what it is to be those who are led by the Spirit of God as the children of God. Amen.